Welcome back to the Artie Lange Show. And, of course, we've been talking about it for most of the night. It's the 50th anniversary of the assassination of JFK in Dallas. And on the phone right now is a guy very well versed in it, and one of the more credible guys who believes it was a conspiracy. And we are happy to have him on the show. We're lucky to get him, especially on a day like today. Russ Baker's here. Russ, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Russ, so first of all, give us, in a nutshell, what your theory is of what happened on November 22nd, 1963. What do you think happened?
Well, as best as I can tell from the research I did, I wrote a book largely about the Kennedy assassination. It's called Family of Secrets. I spent 5 years on it. As far as I can tell, all the evidence points to something very similar to what the U.S. has done throughout history, which is to get together an organized operation to change a government. United States, this is all documented and well known, has gone into many, many countries, including those with democratically elected leaders, and sought to overturn the will of the people. And they did this with a combination of military, intelligence, disinformation, media assets. And I think that's exactly what we saw here.
You think it was a coup on some level?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Played out by who?
Well, I mean, if you study the Kennedy brothers, although they were certainly quite popular with the American people, and I see that polls now have John F. Kennedy at something like 90%. It was kind of amazing. They were very popular with the people, but they were not popular with the wealthy and privileged interests that were used to having their way in this country. And in Family of Secrets, I have one chapter just on that topic, listing all of these interests that were not only angry at them, but fearful of them.
Right.
And just to give you an example, Robert Kennedy, as the Attorney General, was probably... He may have been the most aggressive attorney general this country ever had. He went after every industry, and of course organized crime, which J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, said didn't exist. But he went after every industry, and John F. Kennedy had a long history going back to his early days in the Senate. This is not well known, and it's really been covered up by our establishment academics and historians, that he was kind of radical early on. He would give these speeches and say, let's not screw these places up like the French did in Indochina. I mean... he was early on saying, let's let these countries do their own thing and not tell them what to do. And, of course, these large American corporations, mining interests, oil companies, timber companies, what have you, they saw this as this tremendous threat to their bottom line.
So clearly what you're getting at is the Vietnam situation. He probably would not have been aggressive there, and that would have cost a lot of big-time, powerful American corporations money.
Well, it's very clear that he was trying to get out of Vietnam,
right?
And on almost every front. And of course, the generals. And this is all documented that he was in a sort of a power struggle with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They were actually, this is hard to believe today, but they were actually looking forward to a nuclear war with the Soviets, and they felt that we could win it. And Kennedy said, well, what are you talking about in terms of casualties? And they said, oh, well, we might lose 20 million.
Oh, my God. Well, listen, what do you think, how high do you think it goes, the conspiracy? Like up to what level? Could it have been a few future presidents who of this country who were in on the killing of them?
Well, I mean, my book, Family of Secrets, is about the Bush family, and the fact that there are 5 chapters in there with almost information specifically on the Kennedy assassination tells you something. I became interested in this very strange angle. Sounds quite shocking to people not familiar with this, but George H.W. Bush was director of the CIA for a single year, yet they named the CIA building after him. Mm-hmm. He got all of these positions. It wasn't clear how he got all of these positions or why. Became CIA director despite the fact they told us that he had no qualifications, background, or experience with intelligence. My research found that he did, in fact, that he had a long secret life in intelligence work with the cover of being a congressman, a diplomat, oil man, and that he was using particularly his oil company as a front, CIA cutout essentially. And I was fascinated to learn that in an interview they had asked him what he remembered about the day Kennedy had died, and where were you when you heard that Kennedy was shot? And he just blanched. And he said, I can't remember. and so, of course, everybody remembers where they were at the time when they heard. And I was fascinated, and I wanted to know where he was. And years of research, I found out where he was, and he was in Dallas, and it's all documented in Family of Secrets. He was in Dallas. He was working for the CIA. He was in touch that week with one of the CIA's top coup planners. He was in touch with a top military intelligence guy who was running an underground communications bunker in cahoots with the Dallas Police Department. I mean, it sounds like a movie, but the movies come from somewhere. I meet people all the time who make movies in Hollywood, and they say, we love your work as a journalist doing nonfiction because it's stuff like yours that we base our stuff on.
Well, so
in your book, it says that George H.W. Bush advised on the telephone on November 22nd, 1963, that James Parrott had been talking of killing the president when he comes to Houston.
Here's Bush. Claims years later he can't remember where he was when he heard that Kennedy was shot, and we unearthed two declassified FBI memos, and one of them has him by name with his middle initials, George H.W. Bush, his address. It says oilman, and it says that on November 22, shortly after Kennedy was shot, he calls the FBI, and he says, I might know who shot Kennedy. And, this already just makes you want to smack your forehead because you say, well, how many people called the FBI to say I might know who shot him? And then I study, and in Family of Secrets, I have a whole chapter on this Parrott, so-called Parrott matter, where he says, I don't know much about this man, but you better check him out. And my research shows that call was a deception, that it was designed to put in the records that he was in this place called Tyler, Texas, about an hour after the shooting. It wasn't very far from Dallas, but just far enough to want him to establish that he was not in Dallas at that time. So you've got that. And then you've got this second FBI memo, and this one is actually from J. Edgar Hoover himself, and it identifies George Bush as being with the CIA at that time and somehow having a connection to the assassination and to right-wing anti-Castro Cubans who were all furious at John F. Kennedy at that time.
And then the government, can you describe the government's effort to misidentify George Bush?
Yeah, so when it came out years later, as George Bush was ready to take the Republican nomination for president, this memo was discovered by a journalist, and Bush himself, through his office, he's very careful never to lie himself, so he doesn't actually answer these things. He had somebody saying, one of his aides said, "Oh, it must be another George Bush." And so then the CIA said we don't comment on these people, and then they broke their own rule after other media organizations started asking questions. They came forward I think the first time ever, and they said it's another George Bush, and they said it was a guy named George William Bush, yeah. See, George W. Bush. So maybe it was the son, but no, George William Bush. And they said we don't know whatever happened to him. Well, that's either the CIA is incompetent or something else. But someone else found him on a tip, and that man indicated that he had worked at the CIA briefly in that period, but that he never got any kind of the briefings that were referred to in there. He had nothing to do with Cubans or anything else. He said he was practically like a trainee, and in fact, he did a court deposition about that. And what I found very, very interesting was that George William Bush was actually hired 2 months before the assassination and then essentially let go a couple of months after, making it look like somebody wanted to make sure there was another George Bush around in case anyone asked.
Jeez.
Now, as far as the shooters, how many shooters do you think there were, and who were they?
Well, I'm no expert on all the ballistics and all that, but I am right now at a conference of very skilled researchers in Dallas, and from what I can tell, there appear to have been at least 6 shots and possibly a lot more. They actually removed, believe it or not, a street sign which was hit by a bullet. These were the kind of things that proved that it couldn't have been Oswald or Oswald alone, and all of these things have been covered up. But I think what you were looking at was some kind of a triangulation involving at least 3 and possibly many more shooters. And we see, if you look carefully, this guy they call Umbrella Man, and the limousine is coming down the street. It basically comes to a halt. All of these bullets go into the car, and this man with the umbrella on a bright sunny day is pumping it in the air. A man right next to him is pumping his fist in the air. That man, later you can see in a photo, has what appears to be a walkie-talkie in his back pocket. And by the way, for detail on this, I run this investigative news site, whowhatwhy.com, and on our site, if you just go in the search box and you type Umbrella Man, you can see this stuff with all the pictures of these very, very sketchy characters there on the grassy knoll.
Who are the 3 future U.S. presidents that were somehow involved in that day?
Well, they were involved in the sense they were there. I mean, you had Lyndon Johnson, of course.
Yeah.
You had George H.W. Bush, and amazingly, Richard Nixon was also there. And in Family of Secrets, I go into that whole strange sequence of how Richard Nixon ended up being there. Some people think he was involved in this, and of course he was unhappy with Jack Kennedy for having either beaten him or stolen the election in 1960. But my analysis is that Nixon himself did not know what was going to go down, and that they arranged for him to be in Dallas because they wanted to put him in a difficult position himself, because they knew he was going to run for president again. They wanted to have something over him, and also because they wanted to send him a message. And I think this is very crucial. Speaking of a message, that we send out a message that it's foolhardy to think that these people just get to the top and suddenly they are all powerful, like an emperor, that they can do anything they want, and that these enormously powerful interests that shape our policy day in, day out just suddenly let this Barack Obama or this Jimmy Carter just say, oh, okay, yeah, go ahead and do whatever you want.
Right. Well, what about how the people in the cars react? If there were 6 shots, they only really react 3 times when you look at them. I mean, how do you explain that?
The crowd?
The crowd?
Well, look, first of all, almost the entire crowd goes running up the grassy knoll after the shot. So first of all, they thought the shots came from there. So the fact that they thought they came from there, and there is some possibility that there was some shot from the rear, means at least stuff coming from two directions. There's also a guy named James Tague. By the way, I met him the other day. He was here at the conference. He was hit by a fragment of a ricocheting bullet, and that was another one. So if you got the sign and you got this one that hit the street, there's a photo you could actually see of an FBI agent bending down, and he's looking at a bullet on the ground, and there's actually a photo of him sticking it in his pocket, and that bullet is never seen again.
Yeah, that guy who got hit with the fragment was standing by the overpass, right? It was on top of it, yeah. So give me the rundown. You think these shooters, if we say Oswald was one of them, they're paid hitmen?
Well, Oswald was not one of them.
You don't think Oswald was even involved?
Well, he couldn't have been, because they did the paraffin tests on him. With those kind of rifles, you get all this crap all over you. You get the gunpowder, you get all this residue, and they said there was nothing on him at all. In fact, there were none of his handprints on the gun or even the internal parts of the gun. Nothing of the assembly. Nowhere were there any of his prints. And by the way, the funeral director who treated Oswald's body has said that the FBI came in and they took his body and they took his cold, dead hands and wrapped them around the gun.
But you believe somebody was in that depository and used that rifle that they found? It just wasn't Oswald.
Well, no, because the initial group that arrived, the sheriffs and the police that arrived, described the original gun as a Mauser, and one of them was a gun expert, and they later changed it to a Mannlicher Carcano. So they just didn't have the script. But I mean, in any normal situation, if the original people on the scene describe a completely different gun, and then suddenly it's something else, everybody would cry foul. That's how dirty and really disgusting this whole story is, and the incredible complicity. And I speak as a member of the media, of our own media, the cowardliness to not even do a basic job and say, well, none of these things make any sense. I mean, it's beyond crazy, and there are so many of these anomalies. There literally are like thousands. I could go on with you for 3 days with these kinds of things.
Why was there a gun up there? Why did they find a gun?
Well, they put the gun there.
They put the gun. So
of course, the
cops planted the gun.
Listen, Oswald was found on the second floor.
Right.
Okay, in the lunchroom by the superintendent of the school book depository and patrolman Marion Baker within 2 minutes or something of the shots being fired. Now, from the sixth floor, casually drinking a soda on the second floor. And by the way, it's been established that a number of eyewitnesses, we know who they are, went down the stairs right in that period and saw no one.
No one coming down the stairs. And by the time the cop got in there, he should have been out of breath and all that stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
So none of it, the paraffin, none of it. I mean, this guy would have been found innocent in any kind of a trial.
Why does he leave the depository?
Well, you see, this is very complicated because we think Lee Harvey Oswald was a low-level intelligence operative of some kind. All the indications were that he was working for some sort of government agency, but increasingly researchers' consensus is that Oswald actually was trying to stop the plot. And I think at some point he began to realize that there was something bigger going on and began to be really, really worried. I'm almost wondering, because, by the way, about a week before that, I don't know if you know this, he went to the FBI office in Dallas, and he went to Special Agent James Hosty. He left a note for him. And that note, Hosty's superior ordered him to destroy that note and flush it down the toilet. And you can assume it was not a rather benign note. It was something that it didn't incriminate Oswald. To the contrary, it was something that was absolutely untenable for the FBI and the federal government. And increasingly, we think that was a note where Oswald wanted to tell the FBI that there was a plot against President Kennedy.
All right, we got to take a break. Can you stick around, Russ, for one more break?
Yeah, sure.
Russ Baker will be back after these words.
The Artie Lange Show, weeknights on Audience, only on DirecTV.